Good morning, everyone, and thank you so much for joining our monthly call for Mob United. We really appreciate you being here this month, and we look forward to having a very special conversation today. But first, I want to share a little bit about the organization for anyone who may be joining for the first time. I'm DePelsha Magruder, the founder of Mob United, and we are made up of two nonprofit organizations, a 501c3 and a 501c4. Moms of Black Boys United, our 501c3, focuses on providing information and support for moms of Black boys and also promoting positive images of Black boys and men. Mob United for Social Change, our 501c4, is really focused on pushing for policy and legislative change and really identifying those issues that need more systemic change and getting behind them in a major way and speaking out as a group. We are a resource and a voice. So the resource side is more the C3 side, where we really try to provide as much information, resources, support, self-care activities, um, access to professional resources, webinars like this one where you learn about new things that you didn't know before, but really all the information you need to navigate this world as a mom of a Black son. And on the C4 side, that's the voice. And it's really about us empowering you as moms of Black sons to be that voice, to be the voice for your sons in the community, speaking out on the issues that matter, on the issues that plague them often, issues of bias, discrimination, brutality, on and on the list goes, but really empowering ourselves to be effective advocates in all public forums. We do that with a 5-point approach. So we focus on influencing policy, changing perception, demonstrating our power, and that's primarily at the ballot box and economically at the cash register. We also partner strategically with like-minded individuals and organizations, and we promote self-care, which is critical because this can be stressful. You know, the organization started out of my personal distress of seeing so many cases of police brutality and murder, frankly, of Black boys and men, and just the stress that comes along with worrying about your son. So we absolutely prioritize self-care as much as all of the other activities that we're doing. So today we have two very special guests. And before I turn it over to Kim to introduce them, I just have to say that, this month at Mob United, as we have every April, we're highlighting autism awareness and acceptance. We always focus on that for the month of April. And if you've been following us for a while, you know that I am the mom of a son with autism. And it was a big part of the reason why I started the organization, because as moms of Black boys and men, we all have concerns and fears for our sons. But if you have a son with autism, those fears are elevated. And for those of you who are not familiar with autism, in a nutshell, it is a disorder that affects communication and socialization, and also typically has some kind of restricted repetitive behaviors. Those are the very broad markers of how they describe it, but how that manifests in any individual is wide ranging. Like, you cannot compare any two autistic people to each other. Everyone is an individual and each experience is different, but those are the commonalities. And it just causes, as a mom, an increased level of concern and fear. And I'll be interested to hear our guest speakers take on that when we get into the conversation. But I often say that although we are not an organization that is dedicated and focused on autism, I don't believe I would have started the organization if I didn't have a son with autism. It was such a huge motivating factor. So I dedicate this session to my son, and I really hope you've been following all of the work that we've been doing. There's information on our website where you can learn more about autism. We've been featuring our talented autistic sons this month, and I hope Kim will talk a little bit more about that, but we have a talent showcase going, and just please continue to follow us in this area. And with that, I want to turn it over to, I call her the fabulous Kimberly Robinson Alexander. I always say her full name, and she's the head of our Mob Connections database, special needs, health and wellness overall, and self-care. And she's going to moderate today's conversation and introduce us to our very special guests. So Kim, take it away.
Thank you so much, Depelsha, for the introduction. I am ecstatic to be here today. I wish we were here under different circumstances, but I'm glad that we have the opportunity to have this conversation. So Matthew and Lavern Rushin are joining us, mother and son. Matthew was a 19-year-old young man in 2019 when he was involved in a serious car accident and subsequently sentenced to 50 years in prison. And this conversation is the story of Matthew, as well as the victories that Lavern Rushin has won on his behalf to bring him home. So Matthew was released from prison on March the 29th. Welcome home, Matthew, and thank you for being here. Lavern, you as well.
Thank
Can I
you.
give them an opportunity to go ahead and introduce themselves?
Hi, I'm Lavern Rushin. I'm Matthew's mom. Thank you. It's an honor to be here. Thank you for having us on your forum, on your platform, and using your platform to advocate for moms. You know, moms are a special force, and you know, without moms, I guess the country wouldn't be able to run. So, um, and you know, but thank you for using your forum for this. Thank you very much.
Good morning, Matthew.
Good morning.
How are you doing?
I am doing good, just continuing to readjust.
Okay, so I want to start the conversation with just some background information, just getting to know you guys a little bit. So, Lavern, I'll start with you. Can you tell me what age you realized that there was something a little different about Matthew when you realized he was exceptional?
So Matthew was diagnosed. Matthew was a C-section baby to begin with. He had a speech delay, kind of. You know, in growing up, I kind of knew that, okay, so he had the speech delay, language recognition, sensory disorder, and then he also was diagnosed in first grade with ADHD. In sixth grade, he was diagnosed with what back then would have been the autism spectrum, specifically Asperger's.
Okay.
So that he was 12 years old when I figured that out.
Wow, that's
So everything
really
started to add up. Yeah, so everything kind of added up from the time he was born to the time he was diagnosed with the autism spectrum. We, you know, it started to play its part, and we started to realize, okay, so this is what was going on. So, you know, his behaviors, his, you know, growth, his very smart, but just like common sense kind of
Mhm.
things he couldn't figure out. So yeah.
And at the time of his diagnosis, how much did you know about the autism spectrum?
I didn't know anything, and I'm, you know, thank you to the autistic community that I'm still learning. This accident, actually, I learned about echolalia. Like I saw the Dustin Hoffman movie, Rain Man, and you know, a lot of people kind of pull the echolalia in with the Dustin Hoffman movie, but it I learned a lot. And I'm still learning. But back then, when he was in sixth grade, I knew nothing. You know, Google didn't have anything, and then it was just as though the doctors and the, you know, psychiatrists and the psychologists really didn't have. It was a pamphlet that they handed to me and say, okay, go ahead and learn what it is to be on the spectrum, and that was not, you know, that was not enough.
Yeah. So, Matthew, you were diagnosed at 12 and you had a series of diagnoses prior to this. What was it like for you, for everyone around you to not realize what was going on inside? How did that make you feel, and how did you work on adjusting?
Well, I definitely felt alienated when I was younger. And so um I guess that made me a better essentially it made me a self-taught psychologist, to be completely honest. Um because of the fact that I couldn't socialize with people properly or even at all, it forced me to start analyzing people. So when I first started doing it, I would watch people and take mental notes of, you know, body language, micro expressions. I would make snap judgments, like conscious snap judgments, and um flash emotions. Like I was looking at all of that until I got to a point where I was doing that subconsciously. So I would meet a person, and as they were walking towards me, I would watch their body language. Okay, they're walking this way, which means that they have this amount of confidence, which means that we can have this type of conversation. We would start
Mhm.
talking, and I would watch I would watch their face as they were responding to what I was saying or creating their own uh, little motes of dialogue, and just different things were playing through my mind as I'm talking to these people. And so now I can have a conversation with anybody. I mean, first, of course, it's always going to start off a little awkward, whether whether you're autistic or not. If you meet somebody, it's going to be awkward because you really don't even know this person or how their attitude is going to work out or play out in a conversation. But for me, it hit me a little harder because I didn't start out being able to talk to people, and
Right.
so just uh being able to extirpate that wall of socializing with people, and that was probably my biggest triumph growing up, is being able to. I mean, it made dating easy too, because now gals, when I want to talk to gals, I like they can't hide anything from me.
How
Like,
amazing is that that you were able to self-adjust in that way and kind of break down conversation and body language so you were able to navigate your universe at the time. That is amazing, Matthew. So my next question was, what was the biggest thing that you had to overcome growing up? And you've already answered that. So you get through
conversations.
high conversations, okay?
Yeah, it was. I talk about body language, but really it was just conversations and like analyzing people's conversational patterns, how they structure their sentences, their vocabulary usage, their spacings, their breathing, just different things that add into how a person produces their monologue, how people speak. And so that was my biggest triumph. Of course, being able to read body language properly and adjust my own body language to theirs. But being able to talk to someone and break down a person's conversation so that I can better conversate with them, that was my biggest triumph.
Okay. That is really, really amazing. So you're diagnosed when you're 12, you finish grade school, you're getting ready to graduate, and it's about the time where you're doing regular teen milestones, right? So tell us about prom and dating and obtaining your driver's license. How are those things for you, beginning to navigate the adult world?
Well, I guess I can now tell mom this because I didn't I spent like an hour at prom because it was just like it just wasn't for me. I mean,
Mhm.
I I I went with friends, but that's just not how I socialized, I guess. So I guess that was you know um just I wouldn't say it was awkward. It just wasn't for me, and but dating, I didn't have my first kiss until I started my freshman year at ODU.
Okay.
Um, uh, I guess partly because of the social awkwardness, but more so because I was concentrated more in reading and school, and I didn't really think of gals in that way. I didn't really think of maybe I should put myself out there. Maybe I should start dating, because I had to realize a lot of things about myself when I got out of high school, that oh, you are handsome, oh, you can go out and uh, find yourself a lady, and it's just, and getting my driver's license, that added to more of that gave me more responsibility, that helped me grow up a little bit more, and getting a job, that also helped. So it was just different things that Ma and I set up for myself, just
Okay.
so I could progress into adulthood smoother.
So we spoke with a young man yesterday. I shared this with you guys earlier, who one of the things that he said during his interview was that when he got his first girlfriend, and he's almost 17, that he didn't want to tell them that he was autistic because he was afraid that she wouldn't like him. And so I'm going to ask you, if you had a message for that young man, what would you tell him?
What I had to learn, especially when I was younger, is like I meet people now. If I can't be myself with a certain individual, then that certain individual does not need to be in my life. So especially with my friends, like all of my friends, I don't have but a handful of them, but all of those people, I could go up to them and be myself, and I will get that same energy back. I won't get any awkwardness between us. I won't get like, "What are you doing?" You know, I won't get any of that. It was just I can be myself with these people, and it will get reciprocated tenfold if so. And so, especially with gals, if I'm talking to one and that my, I guess, condition comes up in conversation, um and she lets me know either directly or indirectly, I directly directly through verbal conversation or indirectly through body language,
Hmm.
that she either agrees with it or doesn't agree with it, then I will act accordingly. If she doesn't agree with it, then that's it. I'm not going to try to change myself. I'm not going to try to be someone else. I'm not going to try to um appease her, because the person like that is not worthy of being in my life.
Thank you
And
so much
so
for sharing that.
yeah, so what I would tell him is just the right person is going to come along, because like I said, if you can't be yourself with the person you're interested in, then you don't need to be interested in them.
All right.
They're not worth being interested in.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I know that he will watch this, and I think he will appreciate that message coming from someone who is a bit older than him. So thank you so much for sharing that. Um, Tell us about your first job.
Um, so I was a camp counselor working
Okay.
kids. Well, my specific job was I would shadow the kids that were, different. That's how they labeled it as, when I was
Special needs.
16, 17. Yeah, so they labeled as kids that were different, special needs kids. You had there's a little kid named Matthew. He had Down syndrome, and then you had
Mhm.
kid named Ethan. He was autistic. You had a bunch of other kids that I would essentially shadow and
Mhm.
just follow around for the day while they went to the swim lessons, ate dinner, if they needed help using the restroom, if they, just different things that the camp director needed help with. I would do that, and it kind of, I don't know, it kind of brought some more humanity to my life.
Okay. What compelled you to want to work with other children who were special needs? What was that process like for you? There's a lot of different jobs you could have gotten. You chose that one. Can you tell us why?
Well, I had been a camp counselor at that particular camp for almost half my life, and so we're working with kids. I mean, I have the humor of a 5-year-old. I mean, I might have the mental maturity of the mental intellectual capacity of a 60-year-old, but if someone farts, I laugh. Like, it's just, I don't know why. It's just, and then I like my bird. I'm always laughing with my bird, but And so with that aspect of myself, I connect with kids because I can get down to a kid's level. And being that I have the intellectual capacity of a 60-year-old, I'm able to get down to this kid's level and talk to them about anything. You know, I play Minecraft a lot of boys between the ages of 5 and like 13 or 14 playing Minecraft. So we can talk about Minecraft, or uh girls between the ages of 5 and 13. They like talking about makeup, or Barbies, or Disney movies, Disney princesses. I mean, I think I haven't watched Ray and the Last Dragon, but I'm pretty updated on all the Disney princesses, because my little sister, she's 4 years younger than me. She used to watch Disney movies all day and all night. So
Still does.
still does, yeah, exactly. And so it's like, and it's
So it
not
was a
easy.
natural transition for you.
Yeah, because I mean I have a lot of experience in a lot of different areas, and so being able to talk to a kid, it comes easy to me, because a kid, albeit stubborn, are always willing to learn something new, and so it's easy to be able to talk to again. Kids would come up to me like, "Mr. Matthew, what's this?" or "Mr. Matthew, can you?"
Mhm.
And I used to play the piano for kids too, so they'd be like, "Mr. Matthew, can you play this?" And then they'll ask me to look up a song, and I'll be like, "Okay, just give me a couple days to learn this, and I'll play it for you." But yeah.
Lavern, he's talked about all of the compensatory strategies that he's come up with independently, and he's talked about all of the things that he's done. But you kind of have been that cheerleader on the sidelines throughout this entire, time. Tell us what his growth looked like for you and how you were able to supplement that.
So sitting back from the sideline, and being what they call a helicopter mom, kind of in stealth mode, I watched him grow, and I had to always make sure the schools. I saw somebody asked if he had additional services. Matthew was on an IEP from the time we transitioned. We were military, so we transitioned back from Sigonella, Italy, in 2003. So Matthew actually was on a early intervention program. So on IEP when we got here in Virginia. So he was on an IEP, and he was also on a 504 plan. The 504 plan play as he matured in high school. So with that being said, he had speech therapy, a lot of the mental health therapy. So there was a lot, going on for Matthew, and um, I made sure that he had received the proper services. It was challenging times because I did not recognize, the full needs of someone that is autistic. I had to learn that from the beginning. So um, it was just challenging, but I just kind of followed through. I had to make sure that he's plugging in. Sorry, he's plugging um, my battery. Yeah, there's one back there, but that's so sorry.
No worries.
I'm gonna move this over. So again, it was challenging, and we had to learn how to maneuver around. Well, I did as a parent, to maneuver around the system. And as all parents know, fighting the school system to get your child the services that they need, you have to be on top of it, because they will downplay, what needs to the services that needs to be rendered, just so they don't have to continue the services, or get him not necessarily get him the help that he needs, but just in itself, in itself just working out, what he needs. But I sat in the sidelines. I made sure he got the services he needed, and it was challenging at times. It really was. But yeah, we got through it.
What kind of extracurricular activities was he involved in growing up? You mentioned piano. What else did he do?
So he
Uh,
was go ahead.
So I played the piano. I was in orchestra from 5th grade to 12th grade.
You started working.
I was working. I was a counselor. I worked at the garden shop. I worked at a couple different places. I like going biking, and I like climbing trees. I would go to the beach and watch the sunrise. I mean, I took pictures. I did a bunch of stuff because I still have really bad ADHD. So I gotta be doing 20 different things at the same time for me to feel like I'm, normal.
Okay. So you've experienced a lot of things. Tell us about the hobbies that you still have. What do you enjoy doing now as an
All of that.
adult? Okay.
Yeah. Well, I've been meaning to pick up my viola and see if I remember some stuff, but I still play the piano.
Okay.
I still do my photography. I write poems. I write short stories. I'm in the process of writing a script for a potential movie or play or something. Just trying something new, getting myself out of my little comfort box. Um, I go jog. I go for walks. I bike. I've been meaning to climb a tree. I haven't done that in about 2.5 years. Just I pretty much do everything. Just I've gotten better at doing everything now.
Okay. Sounds great. So with that, we're going to take a quick second. We're going to transition to a different part of this interview. As Dipelsha stated at the outset of the conversation, we are hugely tapped into the needs of the human, of the body, of our sons. Self-care is a big part of our platform. And we know that Matthew has experienced a lot. He has been through a lot. And there is no doubt that he has a level of PTSD associated with it. So we're going to transition to talk more about the incident, and we're going to go ahead and let Matthew say goodbye to us and leave. And thank you tremendously for talking with us.
Of course. Oh, thank you. I'm sorry. Of course, thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you, Matthew.
Thank you. Oh, you're welcome.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
Love you.
All right, Lavern. So we're going to transition and just talk a little bit more about what happened on that night. So give us a little bit of background information.
So just in a nutshell, basically Matthew was, got into a car accident, actually 2 car accidents. He got into the first car accident, had a meltdown, and all, autistic parents can understand this. So he had a meltdown, a car hit him, and so he had a meltdown. He left that car accident doing his breathing exercises, trying to figure out what was going on. Long story short, he had got into a second accident, which was horrific. There was a man that was injured, and our hearts go out to him, but it was an accident. That night, Matthew basically, had a array of interrogation. Then you had EV and so fast forward, he got charged with 2nd-degree attempted murder for a non-fatal car accident caused by him having a seizure.
Wow. And so you said interrogation. He was an adult at the time.
That
He
is
was
correct.
over 18.
That
And
is
so how much communication did you have with law enforcement during the time of the incident and during his interrogation? Did anyone notify you?
no one. Okay, so during his interrogation, his father or I could not see him. I got a phone call about an hour after the accident to tell me that he had gotten into the accident, because we were texting him, trying to figure out where he was. And he wasn't responding. He could see where he was. And so a phone call came in from a police officer that said, Matthew had been in an accident. And I said, do you realize Matthew's autistic? Do you realize he was in an accident 2 years ago that landed him in a coma? Do you realize he will need, help? And he's like, yeah. He's, we're taking care of him. But then when my husband got down there, like 20 minutes later, they told my husband that they had already taken Matthew down to the precinct, which was full out lie, because when I watched the body cam videos, Matthew was at the scene until for almost 5 hours. So the accident happened at 7:30-ish. Matthew didn't leave that scene till like maybe 1 o'clock that morning. So they lied to my husband and told him that that Matthew had already been taken to the precinct when Matthew was sitting in the back of a patrol car.
Wow. And did anybody address any of his injuries?
Absolutely not. No. The sad part about it, those body cam videos, I don't think will ever be released to the public, and we will try to release them to the public. You could see when and it looked like it was almost coordinated, because Matthew went from patrol car to patrol car. 17 hours of body cam, I'm not 17, 12 hours of body cam footage. You could see the body cam footage for the whole entire time. EVMS gave him a sobriety test. He couldn't walk straight. He was complaining about his knee. He was, they knew he had a concussion, did not take him to the hospital. They asked him if he needed medical, and a person that has just gone through that severe accident, you're actually asking them if they need medical. How is he supposed to respond? He can't respond. So no, he was never taken to the hospital. He was never taken. EVMS said, oh yeah, he's okay. Yeah, you could see on those body cam footage, Matthew was not okay. And so with that being said, not even an evaluation. He was never taken to the hospital for an evaluation. Their narrative after Matthew got out of the vehicle, when he had the second accident, a man was yelling at him, "Are you effing trying to kill yourself? Are you effing trying to kill yourself?" Matthew then repeated what the man said, which the achalalia came into play, and that was their narrative, was that Matthew was trying to kill himself. Well, in all sense, if Matthew was trying to kill himself, which he wasn't, wouldn't you take him to the hospital for evaluation? He passed a sobriety test. I mean, the motor skills of a sobriety test. You're telling me you're still not going to take him to the hospital. He can't answer your questions consciously, and you're still not going to take him to the hospital.
So for people who don't know, this happened in the Virginia Beach area. Was there a mental health unit that responded even after your husband told them that he was autistic? Did they try to address the mental health aspect at all?
So here in Virginia Beach, they have what is called a CIT officer, crisis intervention officer. That crisis intervention officer, it was a coordinated effort. She is the one that charged Matthew with second-degree attempted murder. She sat there. We have the interrogation video online on YouTube at Neuroclassic. You can go and watch that interrogation video. She basically told Matthew from the beginning, you're getting charged tonight. She doesn't know what she's going to charge him with, but she's going to charge him with second-degree attempted murder. That is a CIT officer. That was what they called someone with autism training. Well, if she had autism training, guess what? It went through the door. Because
Wow.
she didn't recognize his processes. She didn't recognize that when he was talking to her, he was monotone. You could tell after he disclosed that he was autistic, and he didn't really recognize what epilepsy was. He didn't know the difference between, like, they were asking him questions that he couldn't answer. Yes, he knew he was prone to seizures. Did he know he was prone to was epileptic? No, he did. Like, you could tell he wasn't. They were never released, those body cam footage, because it shows that their ignorance played a great part of this, and their training went through the door, and or because he was a Black young man, they chose to prosecute him. They chose to convict him. There was no justice.
So you talked a little bit about the evening when your husband came and he was on the scene for as many hours as he was. But as this process continued, can you tell us a little bit more about how his age hindered your ability to help him through?
Well, so Matthew, at the time of the accident, Matthew was 19. Yeah, Matthew was 19. So he was actually an adult. There was no intervention with us. We couldn't intervene. We couldn't advocate for him. So what we did, we hired a lawyer. Well, that lawyer, we thought, had the ability to communicate, or had the ability to understand, and advocate for him. She was only advocating for him on the legal side. She wasn't advocating for him on the autistic side. So we saw it, which obviously led into her convincing him to take a plea.
Right. So let's talk about that a little bit. He ultimately ended up taking a plea bargain, and pleading guilty. And did he have a conversation with you guys before then? What was?
So after they hit him with the second-degree attempted murder, anybody would be sitting there and understanding Matthew is also, he's autistic. He has anxiety disorder, ADHD, and so he's sitting there with the second-degree attempted murder. Then they knew, the Virginia Beach city's attorney's office knew that the second-degree attempted murder charge would not stick. Right before we went into pretrial, they hit him with 3 charges, all of them, 2 counts of aggravated malicious wounding. Aggravated malicious wounding minimum sentence is 20 years to life. So 20 years to life on 2 counts, and then a hit and run. So you're sitting there with this horrendous charge, these outrageous charges, and you're thinking, anybody would be thinking, oh my God, I'm going to be spending minimum 20 years and or life. This is a life sentence he could have gotten. So we talked about it. I was ready to go to trial. I was ready. Would he have gotten a fair trial? Probably not, because of the way Virginia Beach is structured, because of, the racism, the biasness here in local Virginia Beach. So he ended up, I guess they ended up giving him a plea bargain, which was dropping the aggravated malicious wounding charge to just regular malicious wounding, which is the maximum is 20 years for each count. I told him I was ready to go to trial. I told him there's no way. And then they had 3 police officers come out and say that Matthew told them that he wanted to commit suicide. I said, hold on a second. You have 17 police officers out there. You have 14 body cam videos. Never once did Matthew interact with those 3 police officers. So I would have called their bluff. And the other thing that just came about recently was that they said that I said that Matthew tried to commit suicide. I've never said that. I said, show me the body cam video. Obviously they don't have it because it never happened. So Matthew took a plea because they also told him that if he took the plea, he would be coming home. That never happened. I told Matthew, I said, you're taking this plea, you're not coming home. You're not coming home. And he's like, yes, Mom. The lawyer said I'm coming home. I said, Matthew, I don't believe that. I honestly don't.
So pleading guilty to what they gave him,
Malicious.
that took away his rights to appeal.
That is correct. Yes.
And I also know through conversation with you, Lavern, that you were also told that you should be quiet, that you should not go to the media, that you should not make a big deal about this. And so now you have your 19-year-old son who is pleading guilty to this crime. He's going to prison. He's been lied to. You've been lied to. You guys have been lied on. And they are attempting to silence you. Tell me what you had to learn and what rose up in you that made you start to speak out.
So before sentencing, I was told, stop posting, because I was belligerent. I was out there. I was posting publicly about what was going on. On my personal page, I was posting. His lawyer told me, Lavern, you don't want to do that because Matthew could suffer a worser consequence. And I said, worser consequence? What does that mean? So I waited till sentencing to see if the city of Virginia Beach would do the right thing. Understand, I testified. I brought up his autism. I brought up ADHD. I brought up the cyst on his pituitary glands that's causing him transient blindness, that's causing him headaches, that could have actually contributed, or who knows, could have actually contributed to this accident. So I thought Virginia Beach would have done it right. Anyways, we went to sentencing. After I heard that judge say he's guilty on all 3 counts, 50 years with 40 years suspended, my heart just dropped. I became so numb. I could not fathom living without my son for 10 years. And at the time, I didn't understand that in Virginia, it would have only been 8.5 years. Well, one day, too much, too long to live without him in a prison. And I didn't know what he was going through in prison, so in the jail system here. I went home, I prayed, and I said, you know what? You had your opportunity, now it's my time. It's my turn. It's my turn to bring my son's story out there. It's my turn to now expose what was going on. And that is what happened. No, wasn't going to happen. I was not going to have my son become a statistic. Sorry.
So I'm assuming that this is probably about the time that you realized he wasn't going to be eligible for an appeal because he's pled guilty to this and was sentenced. So your only option was for you to pursue a pardon in this case, correct?
That is correct. So technically, even though he wasn't eligible for an appeal, we went ahead and filed it anyways. Because my game plan was let everybody think that we were filing the appeal. Like that was what we put out there. We're filing for an appeal, filing for an appeal. Everybody kept coming back and saying, yeah, you're not going to win. Yeah, but that was not my main goal. My main goal was to get the attention of our legislators, right? So that's the foundation that you really need, is to get your story out there, and then in the interim, getting your legislators involved, because locally here we had a Republican delegate, and I will tell you, I was afraid to go to a Republican delegate. I honestly was, but Matthew's story, even to a Republican, we had support on both sides of the aisle. We even had the White House involved in this, and it was an awe to know that both sides of the aisle started to agree this is wrong. And the Virginia Black Caucus got involved, Speaker of the House got involved. I mean, so many people, and I just knew that this was the way to go. Seek a pardon for him. That was the only way. Obviously Matthew was issued a conditional pardon, and that's not what a full justice is for us. And yeah.
So during this time, while you've lodged this one woman fight, and you're taking on all of your allies, how far away from home was Matthew, and how often did you get to see him?
Oh boy. So Matthew transferred out of Virginia Beach in March. I think it was March 13th of 2020.
Okay.
When he was here in Virginia Beach for that 14 months, I never got to see Matthew. We used to do the go to the prison, go to the jail visit, but it was on a screen. And I'm like, why would we do that? You know, when we can FaceTime. Well, at the time they had tablets at the jail. So we used to just FaceTime them on our phone. So I was totally devastated when he was transferred to Nottoway Correctional Facility, which is 3 hours from here.
Okay.
When he was transferred, I lost my mind. But, you know, I'm a firm believer that God had a bigger plan, and God put him where he needed to be to make this right, because Matthew had been attacked in Virginia Beach. They did nothing to help Matthew. Matthew was mistreated in Virginia Beach. Nothing was done to help him. When he got to Nottoway, even though Nottoway is a 3-4 level facility with murderers, you know, and arsonists and the worst criminals you could ever think of, Nottoway was a saving grace for Matthew.
Wow. And was that because the community that he lived in protected him, or was the staff better there for him?
So it was both. It was the community, and you know, they had a couple of guys in there that knew Matthew from either Virginia Beach and or you know, the high school kids. I mean, you would think the high and Nottoway was a processing center, so everybody came through. But the staff, I would actually say the staff stepped up at Nottoway. The psychologists and the warden all stepped up and you know, kind of led Matthew into a way forward, into kind of readjusting. But it was very hard for him. You know, these past years, I will say, has totally stripped his innocence away. You know, he had to grow up really, really, really fast. Like overnight, you know, he remembers sleeping on the floor in a cold jail cell. He remembers, because when he got to Virginia Beach, they didn't have any space, so he was sleeping on a floor on a mat, and the mat is a cardboard mat. Actually, it's not even anything that, you know, he slept on the floor for about 2 weeks. And so again, he had to grow up, and it stripped his innocence away that I can never, you know, I can't even imagine. I hear his cries at night. And
I'm so sorry that your family has had to endure this. It just sounds so horrible for him to have had to experience that. You also mentioned that he was transferred on March 13th, 2020. Well, that was right at the beginning of COVID. What was that like for you guys?
so we went into him transferring to Nottoway, everything stopped. Everything stopped. There was no visitation. There was nothing. We couldn't even do video with him because we couldn't do video with him because, you know, they would have to actually take him out of his cell block and then transport him over to the video. So even in the prison, there was no movement at all. He was transferred to Nottoway because it was a processing center. And so transitioning from Virginia Beach so that's DOC, he was transferring to DOJ. And that's where he couldn't stay, obviously, at Virginia Beach jail for 8 years. He would have to spend that time somewhere else, a level 2 or 3 or whatever level he was classified at. And that's when he was transferred to Nottoway. That's where they do their classification for inmates.
So you gained the attention of your governor. Tell me about the process to applying for a pardon.
So gaining the attention of the governor wasn't really easy. I mean, I was just pounding away. You know, I had Neuroclassic. I had the Virginia Autism Foundation. We were just on a go every single day. And there was not a day that I didn't post. I posted and I posted, I posted. The process for a pardon, obviously we had to find a lawyer or an attorney not within the Virginia Beach area. We had to find somebody that was not associated with any of the judges or attorneys or anything like that. So we went out to Richmond, Virginia, and we found his current attorney, which absolutely, I love her to death. And so, I sent her Matthew's transcript, the court transcripts, and immediately she knew what needed to happen.
Okay.
The process for a pardon, obviously it's a template, and there's documents that needed to be added to his pardon packet, which was, his medical records, psychiatric medical records, which I had 19 years of. There was no, it was just seamless. Like, I had everything together. It was his medical records. It was everything. And then Neuroclassic also helped with getting the crash report. They had a crash expert read the black box data. It was actually misapplication of pedal on the part of Matthew. So all of that had to be, you just don't enter in a petition. There are documents that need to support that. And then also we had, again, both sides of the aisle. We had to get the delegates and the senators involved to support Matthew. And they, obviously the governor had already known from the beginning that, we had a lot of support even from legislators.
You also had a lot of support from celebrities, both locally and nationally. Tell us a little bit about that, about people who started to rally around you guys.
Oh my gosh. So Matthew used to read, I'll tell you this first. Matthew used to read Diary of the Wimpy Kids. And so with that, Devin Bostick reached out to me, and I was like, oh my gosh, Matthew loved you. And Devin actually started to get his rally up. He started doing auctions and stuff like that. And then we got everybody else involved. And then who was it? Culture City, Dominique Wilkins started to get involved. We had Jamie Lee Curtis, we had Holly Robinson Pete reach out to me. Miss Tina Knowles, Beyonce's mom. We had 757 Black Lives Matter come on board. I mean, it was just an array of celebrities and local advocates that just started pounding the pavement after, they start reading Matthew's story and they're like, what? You can tell he had a seizure. Looking at the interrogation video, you can see he's having a focal seizure. You can see in almost 1,000 pages of a discovery package, you can actually see Matthew saying the same thing. When he came to, he had a blackout. He blacked out before he hit that car. And obviously anybody reading it could have tell that this 50 years for a non-fatal car accident. Yeah, no.
So give us a timeline. We talked a lot about the process. How long did all of this take? So
June, we submitted the petition, the pardon petition, June 18th.
Of 2020.
Of 2020.
Obviously.
Yeah, so June 18 of 2020, we submitted the pardon packet. We knew with all of the support we were getting, it was going to be expedited. Matthew's petition was expedited to the top of the list. Okay. This is unheard of ever in the state of Virginia. This is unheard of across the board that a petition would take so much priority. But again, the validity of it took it to the top. Like, nobody would believe, why would a judge sentence him to 50 years? Why would a prosecutor, unless maliciously looking to convict him, would even do something like this, you know? So that was June 18th. Fast forward 90 days, 120 days after. So with 120 days, Matthew issued a conditional pardon.
Let's talk about what a conditional pardon is. What are the stipulations of his release?
So conditional pardon actually reduced Matthew's sentence from 50 years, so commuted sentence, to just 10 years with, I think, 7.5 years or 8.5 years suspended. So basically it would be time served, which would be the 27th month, the lesser of what he should have served. They recognized that the judge had gone above state guidelines. Matthew should have not been charged like that, or not been sentenced like that. So they recognized that the sentence was above state guidelines. So that was number one. So they commuted his sentence. Number two, he can never own a firearm in the rest of his life. Number three, he can't contact and or have any communications with the victims. Obviously the other drivers. He has to seek mental health, which obviously he's already in session, and he's always been on a mental health treatment.
Can he drive again?
No, so that was part of it too as well. He cannot drive again for the rest of his life, but in 10 years, they gave him the option to seek a judge that would reinstate his ability to drive. But here's my thing. Matthew has already acknowledged he doesn't want to drive again. And so with that being said, to have 3 felony charges hanging over his head for the rest of his life, what kind of normalcy is that? There's no normalcy in that at all. And I don't think that it's justice for him at all. I don't.
Okay. So he was pardoned from a sentence which allowed him to come home, but he was not pardoned from the crimes that he was charged with.
That is correct, yes.
And so we know that that's a huge distinction. And it means that anytime he fills out a job application, anytime he has to disclose everywhere and anywhere that he has been convicted of these felony charges. Is that correct?
That is correct, yes.
So what are the next steps?
So our next step is to actually fight for his full exoneration. Our next step is to keep moving. I don't see a normalcy as for him to have 3 felony convictions. He's 23 years old. You know, I may not be on this earth, you know, long enough to help him through his whole entire life. But what kind of normalcy will you have with 3 felony convictions? Even if you explained to them that it should have never happened, the pardon gives them the opportunity to understand, well, yeah, it should have never happened. But now in this day and age, when you have millions of people out of work, you have CEOs out of work, you have, you know, people with masters and PhD out of work, to compete with that, and you have 3 felony convictions, where does that put you in life?
Right.
So my fight continues. My fight continues to get him exonerated. My fight continues to move forward, and I'm not going to stop. And I'm not going to stop because there's so many other Matthew Rushins out there. And here recently in the state of Virginia, we've made changes. Legislators have made changes to allow for mental health to be presented in court. And that's what I want to do. I want to make those changes. I want to make changes, and Matthew's story being instrumental in making those changes in laws to protect anyone that has mental health, that has a mental health crisis, that is autistic. We need to protect our communities.
Right. Well, certainly have lots and lots of people, including Mob United, rallying behind you. And we'll ask our community to continue to stay tuned to what the next steps are and how we can continue to support your story. Um, we, so Matthew came home on,
Yes.
and that was the first time in almost 2 years that you had the opportunity to embrace your son. Tell us about what that transition home was like for you.
Well, I had to, obviously I had to go pick him up from Nottoway. When I saw him, it was almost like, I don't know, I just wanted him. I just wanted to hug him. I really did. And holding him and knowing that I have him home and I can continue fighting for him home. It just,
Take your time.
I was just happy to hold him.
What was the first thing that Matthew did when he got home? Where did you go?
Well, so he wanted a cheeseburger, and luckily, coming back to Virginia Beach, there is a place called Silver Diner. We used to have one here in Virginia Beach, so he knew it very well. And so he was like, "Oh my God, can we go stop? And I want a cheeseburger, I want French fries, and I want a milkshake." I'm like, "Yes, we'll do it." And so we stopped there first, and we had lunch. All of us were starving, so we had lunch and then came back to Virginia Beach. But when we got home, I had already made macaroni cheese because he loves macaroni cheese. So I had that already prepared for him, and he wanted some salmon. And this beautiful piano that Culture City, Dominique Wilkins and Dr. Julian Maha and the rest of the board gave him, sent to him. This piano he started playing as soon as he got in. He was so surprised. He was like, "Oh my God, I got a piano!" Yeah. So it was a good surprise. So that's what he started doing, was automatically he started playing the piano.
Oh, okay. So, Lavern, thank you. I can't thank you enough for sharing your story. I can't thank you enough for being vulnerable and for talking with us. And we now have Depelsha back on the screen. We do have some questions that have gone out. So, Depelsha?
So first of all, I just have to applaud you and thank you so much for your courage, your bravery, your tenacity. I think most of what we're seeing in the comments is just amazement for you as a mother. You're the epitome of an effective advocate for your child. And I just can't praise you enough for sticking with it and seeing it all the way through. So many people wouldn't have had any idea how to go about that. And even if they did, wouldn't have had the courage to do it. So just applause for you. I just wanted to ask a few follow-up questions. There's just so much swirling in my hand because it's just such a horrific story. And, I'm just struck by how little they took his disability into consideration throughout this experience. And I just wanted to delve into that a little deeper. One of the things we're pushing for is crisis intervention training. So to hear you say that the crisis intervention trained officer was on the scene and she's the person who charged him is extremely disappointing, because if we can't count on that person, who can we count on? And then the other thing you shared about the line he was repeating in echolalia. My son has strong echolalia, and his speech isn't anywhere near as sophisticated as Matthew's. And I can see him when he's trying to figure out how to respond, like looking for facial cues and body language to see, like, what do you want me to say? What's the right answer? And if you say something, he'll repeat it because he thinks that's what you want him to say. Yes. And that's the right answer. So I can easily see how they got to, kind of a false confession, so to speak, based on that. And I'm just wondering, from a policy perspective, are they saying that they Like if they look at their own policies, do they think they handled it correctly based on policy, or are there things they were supposed to do they didn't do, or there are just gaps in the policy that we need to advocate for to make sure this doesn't happen again?
So they think that they actually followed procedures. The Commonwealth City Attorney's Office here in Virginia Beach actually applauded the judge and actually said that they agree with what the judge sentencing was, and that it was just. And yeah, they don't think that they did anything wrong. They absolutely don't. And with legislators changing these policies to be able to for people to be able to present their mental health issues or their mental health conditions in courts, I'm guaranteeing they were opposed to that. They were opposed for us from the beginning. I can remember standing in front of the judge during arraignment, the prosecutor standing next to me and wrote down ADHD and Asperger's. Him knowing that Matthew was diagnosed with ADHD and Asperger's at the same time, he took that knowingly that we could not present that in court. So they used it against Matthew. They knew of Matthew's processes. They knew, and they no compassion at all.
Do you think they understand what that means? One of the things we're talking about right now, there's this big debate on whether you should say autism awareness or autism acceptance within the autistic community. And I get the desire to want to move to acceptance, but I don't think people can accept things they don't understand. Awareness, and I actually find that awareness isn't that high. Like I think people, because we talk about this all the time, those of us who live with it, people think awareness is high, but even when I have conversations with people who are very close to me, they don't really get what it means. And they tend to have either very positive or very negative stereotypical perception of what it means, particularly to be high function on the spectrum. They think it just means you're really smart and you're overly focused on one thing. So they don't see the other side of it, like meltdowns you mentioned. So can you, I would love to hear your perspective on that, on where you think the level of awareness is, and maybe if you can illuminate some of the experiences you had with Matthew growing up and what it means to be very bright, but also live with autism and what that looks like on a day-to-day basis.
So I will tell you, here in Virginia Beach, the city's attorney's office basically put out a statement kind of describing Matthew. They said that he went to school and he worked. So basically saying that there was nothing wrong with him, and an insanity plea was never made. Those are their exact words. Well, what that's telling me, and that's telling the autistic community, if you can make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich and do math, there's nothing wrong with you. Well, yeah, that's not the conception. That is not what being autistic is about. And do I think they understand what being autistic is? Do I think there needs to be more training? Honestly, it's up to that individual, whether that individual is aware of what someone that is autistic is, and acceptance. So it brings us to your question. If we have to have awareness of their the autistic traits, processes, to be able to accept it. You have to have awareness first to accept it. Me personally, with having Matthew was late in getting his driver's license. And, you asked before, Kimberly asked, did he have a driver's license? Yes, he had a driver's license, but he was late in getting that driver's license. Why he was late in getting that driver's license was because he wasn't ready. He wasn't ready mentally, and when he was ready, he was scared because how people treated him growing up to now moving to adulthood. What if he gets pulled over? And what if they don't understand him? What if, all the what ifs came into play as transitioning we protect, society protects anybody under the age of 18. What happens when they hit 18 and now they don't have that protection? They don't have that advocacy. They don't have that person that should be there in a situation like Matthew that night, that should be able to advocate for him. So it's more than awareness, it's more than acceptance. It's understanding. And I believe each individual is obligated to make that if you have to go beyond the label. You have to go beyond that, oh, he's autistic. Go beyond it to figure out what else can I do. You can't live every day in a bubble. That's not going to work. And especially for prosecutors, judges, anybody in law enforcement. But do they take the time? I had Pam Mines, who initiated JP's Law, which is at the back of your driver's license. When you flip it over, you can have an ASD code. I never knew about that ASD code. I never knew you can have a restriction code put at the back of a driver's license here in Virginia Beach or here in Virginia. I learned that through what happened to Matthew. So again, it takes law enforcement, it takes the judicial system to get that compassion, to have that compassion, and they don't have that.
I think the compassion is key. And I'm reminded of a conversation that I had with a law enforcement officer. We, at Mob United, we've hosted a lot of public forums with law enforcement to try to help them understand our perspective and us to understand theirs. And theirs is basically always just comply. So they were given their standard just comply presentation and everything will be fine,
Right.
Which we know isn't true even for people who don't have any mental health disorders. But, I raised the question of what if someone can't just comply because they have a disorder that doesn't enable them to process information quickly enough, or they may be hard of hearing, they don't understand what you're saying. And the response was very disappointing. It was basically, in these situations, we don't have time to be figuring out what's going on with you. Like if it's, they're focused on saving their own lives before anybody else. They're protecting themselves. So if they perceive any strange behavior that may, cause them to think something dangerous might happen, they're acting based on that. So I don't know how we get past that when law enforcement training is largely focused on protecting themselves and not the public, and not trying to sort through, as I said, what's going on with you? That's your problem. So it was extremely disappointing, but also illuminating. We have another question. Can you tell us about the support you found from the actually autistic community in neuroplastic?
Oh my goodness. Where do I start? So the autistic community, Neuroclassics obviously was a huge advocate for Matthew, and their resources are huge. Tara Vance, actually, she is phenomenal. She had an array of resources, psychologists, the crash experts, anybody that we needed to get involved. And I on the top of my head, I really can't, kind of pinpoint it, but in asking questions and figuring out, we did a lot of op-ed on my Facebook page, on my Free Matthew Facebook blog page. We did a lot of op-ed. We did a lot of questions, asked the autistic community how they, I really didn't know how Matthew, I wanted to, because we couldn't talk to Matthew when he was in prison, because obviously the lines were recorded and we didn't want them to use anything against him. We would ask the autistic community, well, if you got into an accident, what are your, what are your first thoughts? We had a Zoom webinar asking the autistic community their inputs of what they would actually go through, what their feelings were, what their thoughts were. And so that's how we pieced everything together, because you cannot be an advocate for an autistic person, right? You can't be an advocate for an autistic person if either you're not if you're not living within that realm. And so I needed to understand them. I needed to understand, because I didn't have Matthew, I needed to understand putting pieces together for that night. Matthew also, as you mentioned, Matthew also has a language sensory disorder, meaning that when you're speaking to Matthew, it kind of takes him a minute to register right? So that night, with all the officers speaking to him, questions and this and that, it took him, you can see it took him a lot longer. Obviously sensory overloads and all that. It took him a lot longer. And then from the autistic community, I learned, what that would feel like. I actually had a young lady tell me that she was pulled over. She was overloaded. She didn't understand the questions, so I felt what he felt that night, and I'm still learning.
Before we go to focusing on the future, I just want to hear a little bit more about Matthew growing up and, your experiences as a mom and how you kind of navigated the world and his, conditions and, what maybe if you could share a few experiences of things that happened along the way and how you navigated them leading up to this moment. Because I would suspect you had to do a lot of navigation along the way and it all prepared you for what was to come.
Oh, well, nothing prepared me
Yeah.
no, I can tell you that nothing prepared me. And I wouldn't wish this on my worst enemy, but Matthew, so growing up, obviously, speech delay, the ADHD, I kind of had to figure out what best was for Matthew. I had his sister, younger sibling. So we had to figure out, he didn't like being out in the public. He didn't like noises. I remember we were in Sigonella, Italy, and I had a birthday party. I think it was his third birthday party. And I did not realize the overload. He sat at the bottom of the table, underneath the table, and was bawling, and we couldn't figure out why. And again, this was 1999, 2000. So it was like 2000, and we didn't have www dot Google. We didn't have internet widely as we did now. So I relied on a lot of pamphlets that, and I had to go to the library because we were in, Naval Air Station Sigonella. And so I literally had to go through books to learn what to help him with. And sadly for military members transitioning, we don't have that. Well, back in those days, we didn't have the array of information that is on the web now that you can go find anything. So I struggled with just trying to learn what I could from the libraries, asking questions. I saw that Matthew didn't like being out in the public. So when he started school here in Virginia, and then I saw him taking on the musical aspect of life. And so obviously we took we got him viola. We would hear him up in his room practicing. Then he got into orchestra in fifth grade. Yeah, fifth grade, he signed up for orchestra. And I saw that part of his life just explode into this beautiful blossom. And I took that and ran with it. And I supported that part of his life as much as I could. In any musical aspect, he wanted to start writing. And then he wanted to start playing the piano. But I supported anything that made him blossom. And that was the key. That was the key aspect of our relationship and his growth. And he loved reading. My parents are from South America, Guyana, and they a lot of their books are from England. So Matthew learned both the British English and the American English. Obviously, that's why he has such a phenomenal articulation of language. And I'm very impressed. I said, gosh, if I had that, I'd rule the world. But yeah, so I supported everything that made him blossom.
Well, you clearly did a phenomenal job. It was just so great to meet him and hear from him directly. He's clearly people have described him in comments as such a bright light and pure soul. So kudos to you. And in your early description, you transported me back to my own son's third birthday party. I remember we decided to have it at our block party. We live in New York, and in New York, people have big block parties where you
Yeah.
close off the street and it's a festival outside. Like, this is perfect. It's the same weekend as his birthday. And I remember him just hiding, you know, at our house most of the time because it was just too much. And then when the day quieted down, like just one friend came over, like all the friends who had come over before left, and one friend came over, and it quieted down. And that's when he started to enjoy the day, when it got quiet and it was just one person. So many experiences like that. I think, you know, the number one question that people have, and I will wrap up here and turn it back over to Kim, is what can we do to help? Like, what do you want to happen next, and how can we help you?
Okay, so, well, continue to support us. You know, our next step, I will be announcing what our next step is. I still have a GoFundMe. We are legally, you know, paying our Matthew's attorney. This fight has not ended, so we are still, you know, trying to figure out legal fees and just supporting us. We are going, this fight hasn't stopped. Share his story, any conversation. I learned from a appellate court judge that, you know, it takes that one person to share, and then it shares, and then it shares, and then it becomes widely spread. You know, a lot of people do know about Matthew, but it just needs to keep just going and going and going and going. And as more people find out about it, the more we are going to see change, because, you know, it's not only me, it's you, it's the mom with you know, the child that has Down syndrome. What happens to those kids? And we need to get involved. You know, get out and vote, because those are the people that we vote for that will make the change. Get out and vote.
Thank you. And we actually have one more question. Sorry. Are there any special medications that Matthew takes? And if he's on medication, when did he start? And is it for the autism or the ADHD? Just anything you can share on that journey that has been helpful.
Growing up, Matthew was on Adderall and then transitioned over to Concerta and Strattera. We took Matthew off of the Concerta and Strattera when he was 19 years old, and that was because of the single car accident. He was 5'9" and 110 pounds. He had lost a lot of weight. So we didn't know whether it was the cyst on his brain or whatever it was that was causing him. So we kind of just filtered back a little bit. So on the medication, Matthew is technically right now on no medication at all. And that's just because he's just come out of, you know, prison. And even in prison, they try to give him, I think it was Visceral. But the Visceral was so, I mean, it was almost like he was invisible, like couldn't move, couldn't, you know, function. So he himself said, no, I can't take the Visceral. I can't take that, or whatever it was. And so right now, no, Matthew's not on any medication. Matthews was on Concerta from like 6th grade to 12th grade. And I loved, you know, I liked it because it helped with the ADHD and the autism side of the house.
Thank you. And people are also asking, what is the GoFundMe page?
So if you go to www.freematthewrushin.com, the GoFundMe link is on that.
Okay, freematthewrushin.com. Got it. All right. Well, I cannot thank you enough for sharing your story. It's been such a blessing, so illuminating, so educational, so inspiring. And we just really appreciate you taking the time, especially right now, so soon after Matthew returned home. And please thank him for us and give him a big, huge Mob United auntie hug. We call all of our sons in Mob United our nephews. So please give him a hug from his, you know, more than 100,000 aunties around the country and around the world.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Kim, I will turn it back over to you. And tell us, Kim, in your wrap up, please tell us what's coming up next for Autism Awareness Month.
Okay. Just to echo what the Pelsha said, we are so appreciative of you guys taking your time I know that just the planning of this and the timing was difficult. So we're just really appreciative of that, and um, of you being here and sharing your story. Um, we still have events going on for all of the month of April. The next one will be on April the 14th here on the Mob United page, 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time, 6:30 Central Time. And we will be speaking with a young man who is the author of 3 children's books. His name is Chase Taylor. Join us for that. Continue to look out for what's coming up. And I'm actually going to turn it over to Lavern for any last statements before we go.
Well, thank you again for having me on your show. Thank you again for inviting me. Um, I'm honored, and I'm honored for all the aunties out there. And thank you so much. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Don't forget to go to our website, www.mobunited.org, for our autism toolkit, tools and tips, techniques to diagnosis and managing your autistic child. And continue to tune in. You guys have a wonderful rest of your weekend, and thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Lavern. And thank you, everyone.
Thank you.